but I would say fundamentally down to the core that I'm the same guy that I was when I was 16, 17, 18, driving the gravel roads of Webster County here in Iowa, listening to music with my buds, literally. Yeah. So the first concert I ever went to was September 75, and the Doobie Brothers, who I learned about through my brother, and I bought their albums and really loved them. And what were once Vices are now Habits album was the most recent album. And so Blackwater and all, the great tunes on that album. So that's the period of time where I got concert. And it's so cool what happened where we didn't know anybody was playing first. This is the first concert. I mean, I'm like, okay, this is going to be cool. And this band comes out, and it was kind of a Southern rock kind of outfit. And I didn't really, understand their music well enough at the time, but they played a good set, and they finished with a 10-minute song, which really left a mark on us. And there were 4 of us that were there, man. I'm like, God, these guys, this is great. And they announced them, but it still didn't resonate. Well, it was the group, the Outlaws. And I, to this day, I didn't listen to them today, but there's hardly a day that goes by I don't listen to the Outlaws or the Doobies.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Tonight, we are getting off the Bruce train, and we are hitting the court, the basketball court, and we will be talking a little music, and we will talk Bruce because he normally comes up, but I am talking to writer, coach, speaker, Randy Brown tonight. Randy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Jesse. I have been looking forward to this. Anytime I get a chance to, first of all, meet somebody new, and second of all, someone that has the passion that you do for Bruce and for music in general, it's a joy, because I just love talking about music and what it's meant to me in my life. It's been phenomenal. But so thanks for having me. Yeah, this is awesome.
I am so glad you do it. You know, what's funny is I routinely get people who join me, and they just, I go back to the story I heard a long time ago. A sports talk show host said, if you talk to Nolan Ryan and ask him about his no-hitters, he will give you just the same old answer. But if you ask him about his home runs, his face lights up and he talks. And I get all the time people saying, wow, I didn't have to talk about sports. I could talk music, or I didn't, like this was a change of pace. Yeah. So I am glad you're here. So tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm an Iowan, and I grew up in Iowa in a town called Fort Dodge in Northwest Iowa.
Okay.
And was really fortunate because my father was a sports writer. And so I was in gymnasiums early and often.
Okay.
And it rubbed off on me. And about the age of 8, I was at a high school practice. These guys looked 9 foot tall. And that day, I fell in love with the sport. And of course, as a player first and then a coach. But, I'm one of these kind of rare, knew what my passion was, what I wanted to do at a young age. I mean, that usually doesn't happen. And it's just because of I was just fortunate because I was always in that gym, and the coach, they were family friends of ours. And so, and I saw him and I idolized him, but my playing career didn't make the papers, but But boy, I worked at it. And I did play in junior college. I played for a couple of years after high school, which to me was like playing in the NBA because
Sure.
I had that goal, of course, when I was a young kid. When you realize you're not going to make it, you can take anything, get anything you can take. So, but I loved it. And then shortly after that, realized that you could make a living coaching. And I love the sport so much that I thought it was almost like stealing money if someone paid me to be in the gym and coach basketball. That's the feeling I had. The profession takes a lot of hits.
Yeah.
The game itself has taken a lot of hits, but it is the most wonderful game. And I have met the most incredible, genuine people in this profession. I was a head coach, but I was also an assistant for 7 coaches too. And so learned a lot about both sides of it. And, with sports like life, you have games where you make the last second shot and you win. In life, you're so high, you can't believe the feeling, and the lowest of the lows. And I've experienced both in my professional and my personal life, which has really driven me to do the kind of work that I'm doing now. But everything I do now is a reflection of things I've been through, experiences I've had both on and off the floor.
Yeah.
And it's just an absolute joy for me, even though we have some subjects that are pretty tough to talk about them, because people need to hear them.
Coach, I appreciate that. Couple of things, follow-up questions. One, you talked about the highs and the lows. I remember Steve Nash, the former Maverick, and then went on to Phoenix Suns, and still, he is a coach, was on the radio when he was a player, and he said, in the NBA playoffs, when you win a game, you think you're never going to lose again. And when you lose, you feel like you're never going to win again.
That's so well said.
And I don't know if that was original with him, but it was the first person I've heard it. And my son and I, he loves Luka. He loves the Mavericks.
Yeah.
He loved Dirk before he retired. And so, he's engaged in this playoffs as we're recording. They're in the middle of a playoffs. And he's like, Dad, it's just true. Like, when you win, you're like, we're unbeatable. And then when you lose, it's like, that's it. We're never going to win again. And it is. And I think, not to get overly sentimental, but I think that can be life. I think you can, when you have a setback, you could sit there and go, oh my goodness, my life is over. And then when something goes well, I'm untouchable, I'm king of the world.
Yeah.
And finding that balance really is part of the key to not only being successful, to be happy.
Well, and that's what a coach is for. That's what management is for. There's a really interesting thing that happens, and unless you've been involved in it, it's really kind of hard to understand sometimes with people. But winning is great, but winning can throw you off track. Winning can make you think that I don't need to do those small things like get in the gym and get my 300 shots up before practice because we're winning.
Right.
Or I'm going to eat a little less healthy because we're winning. I mean, everything is, all the colors are bright. Okay. Everything looks wonderful. When you lose from a player standpoint, it's very difficult. Okay. It's the coach's genius. Those guys that can coach teams that there are coaches that just, if you check their record, they're very rarely will lose 2 games in a row. That is so hard to do. It's unbelievable. Well, what happens is when you lose at Oklahoma State, you know that 3 nights later you're going to play at Kansas.
Yeah.
But first of all, you've got their attention because it's a loss.
Right.
Okay. And they are eyeball to eyeball with you. And to me, that's the time for the greatest opportunity to coach and to make the adjustments you need to make and get ready for that next game. Isn't that crazy? I mean, you would think if you're doing well, that's what you would need to keep doing well.
Right.
But it's the opposite of that. It's just really nuts. And to keep I don't care how old they are. I don't care about gender, but to keep players grounded and locked into, okay, that one's over. Our most important game is our next game. And we have to approach it like champions, and this thing in college is different in the NBA because they're professionals and they're getting paid a lot of money. And these guys are college students, so they get on campus and you can just imagine, how blown up they are with students and even professors and people on campus. And
Sure.
and they're young and they're more impressionable than an NBA player would be, and part of the maturity process. But boy, I tell you what, they walk in that building, they walk. Interesting. It really is an interesting thing that happens. And I've learned a lot through that. If you do it right, some coaches are yellers and screamers and they get personal with players when they lose. Those kids aren't trying to lose. They're
Right.
not. I'm telling you, they're not. Now, did they make mistakes? Yes. But I've yet, in all my years, I've yet to see a guy make a mistake on purpose.
So many things there. I remember Kevin Pollak was talking about it. He says, you have to understand, no one tries to make a bad movie. Like, we all think everything's working well. The other thing is, we were in a meeting once, and I managed a tech support team, and someone from a different department said, well, I hear your tech support people are giving the wrong answers. And I said, I'd want to know that. Can you give me specifics? No, I've just heard it. I've heard it. And so the note was, tech support should not knowingly give the wrong answer. Right. And I just laughed like,
right.
Do you actually think that my guy would sit there, or my gal would go, well, I don't know if this is the right answer, but I'm just going to lie till I can get him off the phone.
Yeah.
That's just funny. Why basketball? One of the questions I ask is, I ask people, when did they discover Bruce Springsteen and what about him spoke to you? Mm-hmm. His music spoke to you. And I'm going to get to you in music in a little bit, but I'm going to turn it around a little bit. You've already just told how you discovered basketball, mm-hmm. but why about it spoke to you so much? Why not football? Why not baseball? What was it about that basketball that kind of pushed your heartstrings?
So I got a couple things. I got a couple things that fit. Number one, the ball has air in it. And without trying, if you just simply drop it out of your hands, it's going to bounce back to you. It's almost like the ball saying, come on, it's like it's your dog, come on, play with me. Come on, I'm your best friend. I don't know. I always love the fact that when you bounced it, it came right back to you.
Sure.
What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to keep bouncing it, or you're supposed to keep shooting it.
Yeah.
A baseball, if you push a baseball into the ground, it's not going to go anywhere. Football was different to me. Pistol Pete Maravich said, why would you run around in circles and get tired? And somebody asked him why he didn't go out for track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and the fact that you can go in a gymnasium and be as creative as possible. Some of my greatest memories of being in the gym alone in the summer times when it was just outrageously hot, and just to get in there and be creative. And I do have a great Maravich story, but and so that, and then I distinctly remember, the thing about basketball is there's a goal, and it's up 10 feet or however high your basket is. And, you really can't go in your backyard and play defensive football.
Right.
You can't really, but with basketball, it's like a single purpose sport, really, when you learn it. There's a basketball in your hand and there's a hoop up there.
Yeah.
And when you're young, it's so monumental because you can't get it up there, and you're like, I can't wait till I'm big enough to be able to get that ball up there.
Right.
And I remember making my first shot.
Uh-huh.
And then I wore it out the rest of the day. I couldn't get enough of it. So I think those two things, those are very fundamental things, but I
Yeah.
do remember those as being pretty pivotal when I was young. Loved it. Fell in love with it.
So my dad was in the Army. We moved around a lot. But I was born in Louisiana. I spent when my dad retired, my mom moved us back to Louisiana. So I've got to hear your Pistol Pete story.
Oh man. My dad came home one day and said, "Do you realize there's a college player scoring almost 50 points a game?" And so I would have been 12 years old.
Yeah.
I would have been 11 years old. And I said, first, no way. Nope. You mean their team? No. This one player does. And I could not wrap my head around that. And I learned quickly who Pete was, where Louisiana was, what LSU was all about, what his dad, where his journey had taken him in coaching, Press Maravich. And you talk about an idol. And at that time, WSB in Atlanta, when he played for the Hawks, that was the first team he played for.
Yeah.
That was a ritual. I had the schedule and I listened to all of the Atlanta Hawk games on an old radio. Loved it. And it was so cool because there's no games to watch, right?
Right.
And so I'm a big fan, and I start collecting all the basketball magazines, cutting the pictures out, and you literally could not. I remember my mom saying, I don't even know the color of the walls anymore. I can't see the wall because I had picture upon picture upon picture upon, I mean, just everywhere. And I could not read enough about him. And I was just so enamored by the fact that you could score that many points. Like,
Sure.
how? You know? And so I lived through pictures, which was really cool. You don't do that anymore. I guess
Right.
you could, but you don't have to. And I lived through pictures, facial expressions, the sweat coming off his face, how skinny he was, because he just did not look like an athlete at all. I got to be I was 15, so I was a freshman in high school, and at that time, the Kings, the Kings were the Kansas City Omaha Kings.
Okay.
Yes, Kansas City Omaha Kings. As weird as that seems now for the NBA, they split home games between Omaha and Kansas City.
All right.
And they were playing the Atlanta Hawks on a Sunday. So I'm a University of Iowa graduate, and our whole family went to school at University of Iowa, and my dad loved writing about them. But the Hawks were playing at University of Kansas on a Saturday, and Pistol Pete Maravich was playing against Tiny Archibald in the Kansas City Omaha Kings on Sunday. Now, can you imagine that for a 15-year-old kid?
Oh,
and
yes.
So, and so here we go to Lawrence, Kansas, and I didn't know anything about the mystique until I saw the arena and got inside, and it blew me away. It was so big and just so daunting. And of course, the crowd's different than they are now, but it was still such a historic place. And Iowa won the game. And we were in the locker room after the game, which was not uncommon when I'm with my dad, because he goes in there to talk to all the players. Well, you just head right in the locker room. The next day, we're going to a evening game, and we drove from Lawrence into Kansas City and went to the famous old Mulebach Hotel where presidents used to stay in Kansas City. And it's it's about a block from Memorial, the arena there, Old Memorial. And so we sit in the lobby at in the Mulebach Hotel. But what are we doing? We're waiting for the Atlanta Hawks to walk through, because we have nothing to do all day. And my dad, I'm telling you, we were there a while. And I remember looking up and seeing Lou Hudson, sweet Lou Hudson. And they had come from the arena because they had their uniforms on. And I'm telling you, my heart sank, and I wanted to run out of there so fast, because, I talked a good game until the rubber hit the road. And by this time isn't even a human, right? He's just some, he's just some imagined character. I
Sure.
mean, we make a lot out of idols, right? Like they're not even real. And the other players walk through, and next thing you know, the last guy is there. He is, and he's a big dude now. He was 6'5" and obviously lanky, but he just looked like he could play basketball. Oh my gosh, I never forget. And I sit there and I look at him with my eyes wide open. And he walks over to the elevator, and there's about 4 players over there, high school players. And my dad says, "Hurry up, get going." I go, "What do you mean? What?" He goes, "Get over there with those kids." He goes, "See what's going on, but see what Pistol Pete has to say."
Yeah.
Well, the doors open, and who steps in? There's myself and 4 high school players and
Yeah.
Pistol Pete Maravich, and he took us up to the 7th floor and into his room. And I got to sit on the corner of his bed with I'm sure my mouth wide open, and listen to this guy talk, and the wisdom, and asking about, I'll never forget, he asked how my season was going. I don't know what I uttered, but I mean, I'm in a dream.
Sure.
I just can't imagine this is actually him. And so we're up there a good 20, 25 minutes. We go back down, and I'm blown away. We go to the game that night. He didn't play great, but I'll never forget, Lou Hudson had 44 for the Hawks, and Tiny Archibald, who led the NBA in assists and scoring that year, at 5'9", left-handed 5'9". He had 41. So those guys were just killing it offensively.
Sure.
Pistol only had 15. He didn't look great. But now you mentioned doing this these days. In those days, we literally, they roped the locker room off, but then there was a cooling off period, and then they said, "Okay, press or media, you can go in now."
Yeah.
Sure enough, we walked right in there, and it was the most unprofessional looking locker room. I mean, it was the old standard lockers, and
Right.
there had been humidity in there, obviously, so they're turning rusty. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and it was small, and you got all these huge guys in there with all these media guys, and these guys are they're getting their showers, and they're getting ready and stuff, and got a couple guys are smoking cigarettes, a couple guys are drinking beers. I'm like, this is crazy. So who's one of the last guys out of the locker room is Maravich. And so we finally get to talk to him. I get to talk to him again briefly. Yeah. And he said, "Guys," he goes, "I got an idea," because there were a lot of people, a lot of kids waiting for him.
Sure.
He goes, and he knew the geography of the building. He goes, "Come on, come with me. We'll go this way." So here's Pete Maravich, myself, and my father, and we walk out of an easterly facing door, and nobody was on that side of the building. And we walked up the street to the Mulebach Hotel, and my dad intentionally stayed back and just let the two of us have a conversation. I got goosebumps right now. One of the coolest things ever. And we talked about a lot of stuff about basketball and how to practice and why it's important to practice, and how are my school grades and things. Walk up to the Mulebach, and he goes through that door, and he's gone. Pistol Pete's gone, and he's off. And I didn't see him play again. I didn't see him again. And obviously he suffered a really unfortunate premature death with a really weird heart ailment.
Yeah.
And he was playing basketball fittingly.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just couldn't make up a story that meant so much to me. And we turned around, and I played the next day. We had a 8th grade game or 9th grade game. And so my dad drove from Kansas City all the way back, and he went to work at 7 a.m. And I didn't know any of this was going on. I'm in the back sleeping,
Sure.
And what a thrill for a kid. Holy
wow.
cow.
That's awesome.
It affected me I was an assistant at Drake University at the time, and I got the word that he had passed away. Ooh, man. He was like a family member.
Yeah, so, I get that.
So really cool. Really cool.
I appreciate that. I always like to go to the beginning. So talk to me about what kind of music did your family listen to when you were growing up?
My dad my mom always had the radio on, WHO Des Moines, but my dad liked jazz, and he liked Glenn Miller. And I remember those two for sure. But what was unique about my situation is his brother, my uncle, played at all the famous jazz clubs. He played multiple instruments and played jazz clubs. The Red Garter was one of them in Chicago, and that's what he did for a living. And he was kind of a recluse, and he collected antiques, and he played jazz. He played all of it. I mean, trumpet, trombone, cornet. I mean, you name it, washboard. He played them all. And then he would go during part of the year, he would go to New Orleans and play on the riverboats. And he was a band that would go up and down, and play on the riverboats. And that had an effect on me because I was really interested. And we didn't see him much, and he was a bit of a recluse, so I never got much information. But I did listen to all the old records since my dad had his records. So that's pretty much. And then my dad kind of morphed into, I think, country a little later. So I heard my fill of country music in the car going to. My dad was an outdoor writer also.
Okay.
So in the summers we'd always be going to Minnesota or Canada, and then he would write articles about it.
Okay.
So I spent plenty of time in the car listening to country too, and I said I'm gonna get even one of these days because I don't know how much more of this I can take. And I let him know in no uncertain terms that wasn't my deal. But what the heck, right? When
you started, getting your own AM clock radio, like many of us, you and I are about the same age.
Yeah.
What kind of music did you start drawn to, like when you're hitting junior high school, finding your own voice?
It came from two different places. One, my brother Rick, 4 years, he's 4 years older than I. So by that time, he's older, so he's into albums before I'd even see. My dad had albums, but these were cool albums.
Yeah.
And I remember Rare Earth, and I remember the Doobie Brothers, and I remember Chicago. A lot of those types of groups. Boy, that really was part of my. First, the first things that I heard with him. And then, of course, listening to a station, AM station out of Des Moines, Iowa, KIOA, and that was a top 40 deal. So it was pretty much top 40s. But that Rare Earth and some of that, he had some different stuff, which I really appreciated. I didn't know it at the time. So there were a couple ways that I started to listen and got really, got hooked to it. I couldn't wait till I got my own little, I got a, one piece with two speakers and a turntable. And that was my stereo. And, when I got old enough to actually have some money to buy my own albums, it kind of went from there. But,
do you remember your first album you bought with your own money?
I do. And nobody, nobody understands this. I don't even understand it. They don't believe it. Actually, I bought that Olivia Newton-John album where she's standing there and there's trees and grass and stuff, and she's in denim. And I don't know. I was probably just really taken with this, beautiful gal who's a popular singer at the time. And I got it through that Columbia House where you mail in and they send them to the house.
Sure, absolutely.
Yep. And I got it through that. But shortly after that, we had a record store in our town at the mall, and that became the place where I bought everything and started to, my own collection began in earnest.
Yeah. Who were some of your favorite musicians, bands, and has your taste morphed as you've, gotten older?
It's got more diverse.
Yes.
And it's got much larger, but I would say fundamentally down to the core that I'm the same guy that I was when I was 16, 17, 18, driving the gravel roads of Webster County here in Iowa, listening to music with my buds.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah. So the first concert I ever went to was September 75. And the Doobie Brothers who I learned about through my brother, and I bought their albums and really loved them, And What Were Once Vices Are Now Habits album was the most recent album. And so Blackwater and all, great tunes on that album. So that's the period of time where I got concert. And it's so cool what happened where we didn't know anybody was playing first. This is the first concert. I mean, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, this is going to be cool. And this band comes out. It was kind of a Southern rock kind of outfit. And I didn't really, understand their music well enough at the time, but they played a good set, and they finished with a 10-minute song, which really left a mark on us. And there were 4 of us that were there, man. I'm like, God, these guys, this is great. And they announced them, but it still didn't resonate. Well, it was the group, the Outlaws.
Okay.
And I, to this day, I didn't listen to them today, but there's hardly a day that goes by I don't listen to the Outlaws or the Doobies. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I mean, these are guys that I now have got to know.
Oh, really?
Which is really crazy when I think about the first concert I ever saw. Those guys walked out on stage and they're playing, and they are blowing me away. And years later, their lead guy, Henry Paul. Let's see. I got my list here. Let's see. The Outlaws. I'm at. So I'm 11. I keep track of everything. This is a coach in me. Yes. I've got a big thick poster board here that has. I got to update it, but it's got every band I've seen, how many times I've seen them, how many total shows, how many artists, how many bands. It's just, oh boy,
it's a stats thing, right? It's
a stats thing. Yeah. It's just giant. And
that's amazing.
Oh, I mean, it's big, and I got it alphabetized, and I'm right now working through where I saw everybody, because I want to be able to, while I can still remember right now exactly where I saw them. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then the Doobies come on, and that was, ooh boy, these are the Doobie Brothers, and sounded just like the Doobie Brothers that I had fallen in love with. So that's where it started. And then I would say, what became the classic 70s.
Yeah.
But it all changed one night in Des Moines, Iowa at Veterans Memorial Auditorium when I went to see Ted Nugent for the first time.
Okay.
Half man, half beast, the loudest thing I had ever heard, and a guy that I thought was either on a massive amount of barbiturates or he just loved it that much. And fortunately, lo and behold, I find out that it's the latter.
Yeah.
And the guy never did a drug. And who would have known, because his facial expressions, his athleticism on the stage, his screaming, his playing, his everything was like, and I remember thinking, could you love something enough to put that much energy into a show?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen anything like it. And it really changed me. Whew, man. But before I saw him for the first time, this is the last part of my growing up and learning about rock and roll. And this is something I wish for everybody, and maybe in different parts of the country, everybody had the opportunity to hear something like this, but I don't think so. Arkansas had a station. That was the station. They had a program called Beaker Street.
Okay.
And it came on at midnight. And I started to listen to Beaker Street. And so I'm listening to bands I've never heard before. I'm listening to music I've never heard before. And it was album rock is what it was, yeah. Right? Album rock. And what they called underground rock at the time.
Sure.
And they had, did you listen to Beaker Street? Are you familiar with it?
I've not of that, but I am familiar with, I was smiling because couples during the pandemic, during the really depths of when everything was shut down.
Yeah.
Bruce Springsteen started doing DJ sessions where
Oh,
on E Street Radio, where he actually played great songs. He played albums or
yeah,
singles
yeah,
and told stories about them. And
yeah.
one night, he started at 12 o'clock midnight on East Coast time, 11 p.m. here in Dallas. And the rumors, Randy, all over. Oh, he's going to announce a new album. Oh, it's going to do.
Oh,
And
I'll
it was
bet.
it was just because he said back in the day he'd be laying in his bed with the
There it is.
radio under the pillow
Yep.
listening to that. And so
Yeah.
he did a segment of just night music and everything.
Yes.
And so when you telling that story made me think of
Very
that,
cool.
because I can remember doing that too, like putting
Yeah.
your clock radio on
Yeah.
and falling asleep listening to that.
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
The thing about this was it was so unique because it's not top 40. So you're sitting there, and I'll never forget listening to a Zeppelin song and then Roundabout by Yes. And then I heard Stranglehold for the first time on that show. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? So they would play for like 40 minutes without any words being said. It would go right from one to another, no commercials, no commentary, no nothing. Now, they always had to give their station identification. They always had to do
Absolutely.
that. And then the guy, Clyde Clifford, he would come in there and he had a really unique voice, kind of a dark voice, deep voice. He would come in and talk a little bit about, and all he'd say was, that was Roundabout with Yes, followed by Ted Nugent, Stranglehold. And you would think he fell asleep. And
Yeah.
they had this weird like space music playing in the background. That was kind of you knew you were at Baker Street when you were hearing that. And then it would go right into, and it's great because they have a following now on Facebook, and you can actually go back and get the set list from different dates and stuff. So I've gone back into 74 and 75 and read
That's
some of that.
great.
I go, I remember these songs.
Yeah.
This is so cool. And so, oh boy, yeah, that Beaker Street was crazy good. And I gained an appreciation for long songs and instrumental songs,
Yeah.
which I still love to this day.
So did you ever pick up a little bit of Bruce Springsteen or see
Yep.
him perform? Talk to me a little about that.
Yeah. And that would have been later.
Yeah.
And it would have been in college.
Yeah.
So I'm an 81 grad from the University of Iowa. So certainly in high school and college, you're hearing, you can't avoid it, right?
Right.
I mean, there's no way. I thought his name was always unique, so you could always remember the name.
Yeah.
And that he always, I don't know, his songs were always pretty special because they just seem so thoughtful.
Yeah.
Like, they're just not, and I love a ripping guitar, but they're just not ripping guitars and this and that. And, because his songs are, oh man, they're it's a science project to get through some of those songs. I mean, try to figure out where he's coming from and what he's saying, and very thoughtful. And so that kind of hit me. And then he got big, and he would tour through Iowa, but I didn't see him. I guess he might have just been right on the cusp of where I was with who I really liked. Let's say my favorite bands.
Sure.
He was probably on that next cusp, and it's probably a geography thing.
Sure.
Although I'll tell you, there are a lot of people that I know that are from this town alone that are dyed in the wool. My brother-in-law is probably Jimmy Jorg. I would rival Jimmy with anybody.
Yeah.
I mean it. And I know the hardcores.
Yes.
But here's a guy who's broken down every song, and he'll bring things to me and say, I'll give you a month. I want you to study this song. Tell me what you think. Things like that, which comes with being a Bruce fan, I learned that through him. But
that's funny.
He's got quite a bootleg collection, but he studies it, and he's got a tremendous Boy, he's got a tremendous heart for Bruce.
He should
Big time.
send him my way, and I'll love to visit with him. That sounds
You would
awesome.
love to visit this.
Yeah.
There's only one Jimmy Jorg.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But, it wasn't until, there was certainly a familiarity, but it wasn't until I went to Kansas City and saw him with Jimmy.
Yeah.
To where, like, everything that I knew was true. I could see everybody standing and everybody singing every word. And I had not seen that.
Right.
All the stuff I had seen by that time, which is quite a bit, I had not seen that. And he's up there talking about the food bank of Kansas City, and he's joking, and it looked like a bunch of grown-up kids on that stage having a ball playing music. I'll never forget that. And the people behind us were saying, now in Providence last week, he opened with so-and-so, and I'm like, this is not your normal deal now, okay? And I hadn't seen 500 shows like I have now, or how many ever it is. I had only seen, probably 30 shows by there, 50 shows by that time, maybe. And I'm like, wow, that is awesome. They're into it that much. And I was just learning. And Jimmy helped me out a lot. And other guys from Fort Dodge helped me out a lot in learning that it is way more than an album or a song. There's just such allegiance and devotion involved in being a fan of his. My goodness.
What's so funny, Randy, is I'll run into someone and I've seen Bruce 16 times, so I'm not but my first show wasn't until 2002 for various reasons. Grew up in Louisiana, and then I moved to Dallas in 86. And by then the E Street Band, he broke up right afterwards, and you're raising kids, and, you just didn't have the opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, so when I tell someone, they're like, I can't believe you've seen him this many times. And they, and I have to explain, I said, well, I unlike other artists, like, let's say, Billy Joel, I love Billy Joel. Billy Joel's a great performer, but, there's a pretty good chance that 99% of his set list doesn't change the whole tour. I mean, he has his show, he has what he's doing. I remember my wife and I went to see, speaking of country, Brad Paisley, right? Great show, wonderful show. Then the next year we went, and Linda's like, it was the same show. And it wasn't quite, but it was similar. So, and so that's why you go, well, you understand it's a unique experience every time.
Oh my God.
It's like, other people, like Pearl Jam and other bands that they rotate it up. They do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you had to say top 3 musicians, and I know that's not fair, but Doobie Brothers, Nugent.
Yeah, Doobie's, Nugent, and the Outlaws, probably, to be honest with you. I got my top 10 here.
Okay, please share.
Okay, so Nugent's one, and a guy you probably that you don't know of, and he's a blues music, he's a blues guitarist from Austin, Texas, Chris Duarte, and he's as good as there is. And I've seen Chris probably 60 times, I suppose. And we've become good friends.
All right.
Here's another band. These aren't necessarily, but I'll give you my top 3. These aren't necessarily as I read them
in order. Just
This is a country band we used to follow, country rock band we used to follow in college all over the place, and just bugged the crap out of them. Daisy Dillman Band. They're in the Minnesota Hall of Fame, but they are in my top 10. The Outlaws, Henry Paul, and the country group Black Hawk is actually the Outlaws.
Okay.
It's the same guys. They just go change if they have to.
How funny.
Kansas was really, really impactful to me growing up. I met a guy, Kevin Kinney from Driving and Crying. So Driving and Crying out of Georgia is on there. The Doobie Brothers. Bob Seger he's a Michigan guy like Nugent.
Yeah.
Skinner was always big, and then Stevie Ray. And I never saw Stevie Ray. I've seen that group right there. It says 109 shows. Probably by now, it's probably more like about 125.
Yeah.
I've seen all those together. I plan to see Nugent 5 times this summer. I'm at 29 with him.
Okay.
And the reason I don't hear well is because the first 24 shows, I didn't wear earplugs. It's not been since the last 5 shows I have.
Okay.
How smart was I, right?
Yeah, we all that. Yeah.
Yeah. But, the Doobies and Ted and probably the Outlaws, I would say.
That's nice.
Would be it. Yeah.
So I want to go ahead, finish your thought.
No, I just wanted to say, in fact, I recently wrote a chapter for a book, and the topic was inspiration, and I wrote about, and I'll get you a copy of it.
Oh, good. I'd love that.
I wrote about how music to me was, initially it was about guitars, and it was about, this guy's a rock star, and this guy, they sold all these albums, and Kiss wears makeup and all this stuff. Well, when I started, when I was younger, that's how I perceived it. Music to me is the biggest ally that we all have. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have a very difficult time in this world speaking to each other. We, almost without fail, music has been able to bridge gaps that nothing else can. And this can be age, this can be gender, this can be race. It is phenomenal. And so I wrote about how it isn't that I'm passionate about music, and I was really mincing words, but I wanted to, that they asked me if it was more being inspired than anything. And so I had to really sit down and think about this. And that's what I came up with. Meaning, when I see an artist, or I see a show, or I see something online, or I go back and I grab an album back here and listen to it, I will begin to appreciate totally the artist, the music, where they were in their life at that time. That's why I just love the history of music, because I love stories of these musicians when they were young, and how they grew up, and how they molded music into their life, and why they wrote the kind of music they did. But I am inspired every day by music, because music comes from the heart, takes a lot of work. I've traveled with bands. I can vouch for how hard it is out there. Everybody says how hard it is on the road. Go out on the road and hang with some of these guys. And man, I'm driving through the night and the whole deal. If music doesn't inspire you, just watch someone. They will literally do anything to get to that next gig, and then be ready to play a hell of a show. And it's things like that really, I'm so indebted to my father and my brother and Beaker Street and because you just never know. Had I not heard that stuff, I mean, what I'm doing, music, just something on the radio, and I can't imagine that world. And here's where I'm going with this, because I wanted to make sure that I spoke of this. My family, we went through some really, really difficult things. So I was coaching college basketball all over the country for 20 years, and in a lot of different places. We moved a lot, and it's stressful. I mean, it's one of those things, win enough games, or go find another school where you can hopefully win enough games.
Yeah.
So it's pressurized. It's a tough gig, but I loved it. But we lost a 4-year-old daughter in 1992 to a rare, quick-acting disease. And 3 years later, almost lost on her deathbed, our second oldest, Claire. She made it through with the same quick acting disease. 3 years after that, we suffered another death in our family, and our third daughter, a 4-year-old daughter to the same disease. So as we're going through all this, and this is why I know I'm inspired, I lost flavor for everything. My marriage, I probably faked it around my kids and my family because I had to keep them going. But anything else that held joy in my life no longer held joy, except for one thing, and that was music. And I was in a really, really dark place, and I didn't trust myself at the time. It's after our second daughter died, and I would walk the same path every day with a Chris Duarte cassette tape in a yellow Sony Walkman. And I don't know why, but for almost a year, that's the only thing I listened to is that same bootleg, that same 90-minute bootleg. I don't know why, but I've told Chris many, many times, man, that you kept me going because I don't know what would have happened. And to think that music could actually keep the last strands of my mind and my life together, keep them held together because it's music, means it's inspiration isn't even a word. I mean, it's so far beyond that. But isn't that just kind of nuts? How of all the things that I could have done, not to say that I wasn't talking to other people and in communication with people who could help and through tragedy and stuff. No, we were, but when it got down to it, I mean, it was my friend. It was my friend.
You know, and Randy, when couple things. One of the reasons I do this show, and I talk about the magic and the power of rock and roll, and I've had stories. I've had a writer talked about he and his wife had a premature daughter, and she was the girl born too soon, and he read Harry Potter to her, and he played Bob Seger and Bruce Springsteen songs all the time, and she, she's now, when Bruce was doing his book signings, she actually got to go. And this a funny story. They asked the little girl, "Did you get to talk to Bruce very long?" And she said, "No." "Are you sad?" "No, he knows me. He wrote me all those songs." And then one of my other favorite,
so precious.
Yeah. And then one of my favorite stories is there was a young man, his mother was hit by a car when he was in the womb. And so he was born with severe disabilities. And like at 3 or 4 years old, he'd never spoken, just really inattentive. And they happened to be in the car, and a Springsteen song came on, and he started nodding his head. And so she went back home, found every Springsteen album she had, and started playing it. And so when Springsteen went to New Zealand, I helped, a very slight part. I had her on her story. There was a newspaper doing it. And so he got to meet Bruce, and he speaks, he reads, his sight words were Bruce Springsteen lyrics on closed caption. He would watch Springsteen music and hear, and that's how he learned to read. That's how he learned to speak. And so I asked her, I said, "Do you think, Stephen was happy?" And she goes, "I hope he was, but I don't know if he was till Bruce." I said, "So Bruce literally gave your son voice and joy in his life?" And she goes, "Yes." And so when I hear your story, right, like, you would have almost said, "Oh, well, of course, Coach Brown is going to say the only time he was happy is when he was on a court bouncing a basketball or watching kids play. That's when he got away from it. And no, as much as you love basketball, as much as this has been your passion in your life, it was music.
It was.
Music that comforted you and
Yeah.
got you through it. I think
Yeah.
that's just beautiful.
Yeah. And it remains that way today. It's you're into music, Jesse, when you wiggle your way into stagehand work, which I
Yes.
did 10 years ago. And the first show I worked was Skinner.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it to make money, and I didn't do it because I was interested in the craft. I could get closer to the stage.
Mhm.
And so I've been working as a stagehand for 10 years. Some of the big concerts at arenas, but a lot of festivals. And in fact, I'm going this fall in September to Asbury Park to work at the See Here Now festival that's right on the beach.
Yeah.
That has become pretty famous. And I have actually met some of the people over at Danny Clinch's studio,
Yeah.
the gallery over there,
Yeah.
and met some of those folks, and that was really cool. And you get to see some really awesome Bruce pictures
Those are
in
some
there.
beautiful. Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
that
awesome.
was just last fall, so that was
Okay.
neat. And then I got to know these folks, and they said, hey, would you like to come and work for us at the festival? So it's going to be a blast.
That's going to be so great. That is
Yeah.
awesome.
So obviously I went to the Pony and
Yeah.
the whole deal, trying to do all my Bruce stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I know you took a lot of the angst and the struggles your family did, and you wrote a book. So talk a little bit about that, Coach.
Yeah, it was something that I just felt I needed to get it out.
Yeah.
And fortunately, my father and my brother both were state and national award-winning sports writers, and so there's some journalism in the genes, and
Okay.
I got just enough to be able to pen paragraphs together. And I just wanted to, for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to get it out of me. I just felt it was in there and need to get out. And then the other thing was, I was hopeful that through the stories of some of the things I had been through, that it could help other people.
Sure.
When you lose a child, the first thing you think is, I have no idea what to do. Well, we
Right.
don't, because it's not a college course.
No.
Nobody prepares us for that. We get prepared for tough times, sort of, but not that specifically. And so I think there are parts in the book that people can resonate with. I say it's either happened to them, they're going through it now, or they will at some time in their life. When we're young, we don't know what adversity is. I remember
Right.
my grandmother passed, and that just bolted me to the floor. I'm like,
Right.
What's going on? And then it started, and we didn't know. We didn't know all the adversity that was going to be ahead of us, but we have to learn how to properly deal with it. Sometimes I have, and sometimes I haven't. I'm proud of the book. I know that it's helping people. I don't, people ask me how many copies it sold. I couldn't tell you. I turned it over to Amazon and let them do that part of the commerce. I judge the book on the feedback that I get from people, and it's usually emails that people send me once they've read it. And
Coach, what's the name of the book?
It's called Rebound Forward. Rebound from life's most devastating losses and stay in the game.
Nice.
And it's really what I do right now. So I'm a speaker now, an author, a coach, as you said. I'm the kind of coach that's not on the sideline. I coach people individually and in groups. Very active in social media and audio. All of our audio, our clubhouses and fireside and wisdom involved in those, just to spread that word. I don't want people to feel like they're alone. only if they choose to, because you should never be alone going through something like that. And yeah, so rebound is really important to me. And it's actually is not a basketball title. It's about getting up.
Yeah.
That's the rebound that I speak of.
Sure.
And what I tell people is, listen, you have a choice. All right. So much of our life, we don't have a choice. This you have a choice. You can quit and give up. And we have kind of a scary suicidal trend going on right now in our world. I know a lot of probably pandemic, backlash or whatever. Yeah. I'm sure they'll figure it out with the research through the years, but so you have that element that just said, I want to deal with this. But then you have that middle element, Jesse, that I see a lot. And it's people that get up. They actually do rebound. They get up, but they don't go anywhere, and they stand there, and the whole rest of their life just goes right by them. They're there, they're going to work, but they kind of have that look in their eye like, no, this is as good as I'm willing to do.
Yeah.
Then you have rebound forward. And I pray for rebound forward for everybody in this world when they do hit. We're not just talking about losing family members. We're talking about a lot of different things. We make some of our worst decisions in the throes of adversity because we're hurting and we're pissed off and we're angry and we don't get it and we're asking why, and there are no answers to why. But if we can rebound forward, which means we're going from a survival mode to a thrive mode. And I'm in a period of my life, I'm 64, and as great as those beating Kansas 5 straight times and playing in the Elite 8 game with Michigan State and coming that far from going to the Final Four and maybe winning the whole thing, they pale in comparison to what I'm feeling and seeing now about my purpose, which is very clear to me now. It's that I've taken the whole catalog of my life, all the pain that went with it, all the great stuff, wrapped it all together. And I know that I've got a gift for people. And if I put it in my pocket and I leave this earth one day with it still in my pocket, shame on me.
Yeah.
It's a gift that I can change lives. They might not remember who told them that something. I have 5 R's that I give that are part of my presentation. And those are response, respond, or excuse me, response, reinvent, resilience, redemption, and reward. And then I plug in my stories into those 5. Sure. And it's the way that I got through what I got through. Not until I went back and I looked, how in the heck whoa, what happened there? How did I get through this stuff? And so I've got it down to those. Reflection is the first one. I've got it down to those 5, and that's how I pass on this gift to people. And they can do with it what they want, but boy, I'll tell you what, we are not meant to grieve alone. We are not meant to go through life alone. And we've got to reach out. If it's one person, it's one person. If it's a whole covey of people, that's awesome too. Mm-hmm. But boy, I'll tell you what, life can be so brutal. I don't think we were created to handle it nearly the way that we do. And so I hope to just pass as many gifts out to people as possible. And along the way, I jump in my 35-foot Winnebago motor coach and I go watch music.
Nice. Very nice.
I'm going to send you some pictures on the back end of this, because it's my own personal Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Robin Zander has stayed in it. From Cheap Trick, Bret Michaels is going to be in it at a festival this year. And a handful of bands have been in there and hung out in there. And I've driven 3 bands to gigs too in it.
That's greatness. That is so good.
Anyway,
yeah. Rebound forward.
Count me in, man.
Yeah, that sounds great. Reminder, the name of the book, Rebound Forward, Rebound from Life's Most Devastating Losses and Stay in the Game.
Correct.
I see it there on Amazon. It's available in paperback. It's available on Kindle. Check it out. All right, so back to music. Is there a band you haven't seen perform live that's still on your wish list?
Oh, goodness, do I have a list? So I have two things. This is my schedule. These
Okay.
are potential shows
Yes.
by for the next 8 months by day. And then this is, and you can't, I've got bad handwriting. There are probably, Jesse, 11 pages here with names from top to bottom and front to back and highlighted.
Yeah.
And so I have a to go. I mean, I saw the Foo Fighters 3 years ago. That had been on my list for a while. I love bands. I always say bands that nobody's heard of.
Yeah.
It's like an Easter egg hunt for me.
Yeah.
It's like recruiting. I remember recruiting players that I hadn't seen a lot, but I had heard a lot about, and I finally got to go see them, and it was just like opening a Christmas present. It's the same thing. I have so many. I couldn't read these, but I would say that. I mean, I think I have 40 on a list.
Okay.
I never saw, and I don't have to see everybody, but I did, I never saw Zeppelin.
Yeah.
I never saw the original Skinner Act, which was, man, it was right down the road and I didn't see it.
Yeah.
I was working at Marquette University in Milwaukee and did not go to Stevie Ray's last show.
Wow.
Ever, and lived right there in Milwaukee, things like that. And you can't see them all, but I have seen the Stones. I want to see them again. I have, I'll tell you, I love to network and I love musicians and I love music. I've got to know some of the coolest people. I got to know a fella who is Ron Wood's guitar tech.
Oh, nice.
And he worked years with Joe Perry and
Mm-hmm.
did tours with Angus Young.
Oh, nice.
So he's good at his craft, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But he's working. He told me that he was on the Bon Jovi tour, and he told me the other day that he's heading out to work with Ron Wood. So being in touch with guys like that is really cool. And then the last guy, and I cannot talk about Kenny Aronoff. I didn't know Kenny Aronoff when I learned he was at a speaking engagement, one of the top 100 rock drummers of all time. And I met Kenny. We talked for 15 minutes. We really hit it off. He spoke and played his drums that night at this event. And he is the most humble, the nicest guy. And he'll call up and say, I'm on the Hendrix, on the Hendrix Experience. I'm in Milwaukee. You got to come up here. You got to come up to the show. I mean, this guy, he's appeared on 290 million albums.
Wow.
Yes. He's one of the great session drummers of all time. I met him at an outing, and in 15 minutes, we became fast friends. And there's not anybody that Kenny doesn't know.
I bet.
Believe me. And man, he's been a blast. But yeah, I want to see my top 10 as much as I can.
Sure.
We're all getting old. Unfortunately, these rock guys that we've listened to forever getting old too.
Yeah.
And it's tough, but
it is tough.
It's part of the deal, right?
We're all us E Street Nation are holding our breaths, hoping that we get the E Street Band again in 2023. Yeah. It's been too long since Bruce has been out there. And I know he's ready to get out there.
Right.
God, this has been so much fun. I just have had a blast. Before I end this, any final thoughts, Coach?
Yes. Here's my final thought. If music soothes your soul, listen to music. If you find yourself not being a real fan of being on this earth much longer, turn on some music But I plead with you, call a trusted friend and speak the truth and tell them what's going through your mind and your heart, because it isn't worth it. It can't be. There are people in this world that love you. There are people that need you. Between music and others, it can make the biggest difference in your life. That's what I would say.
Well said, sir. Well said. This has been amazing. I now want to have you here, once a month, just us to visit. So if you are a fan of Randy's, you've attended, let's say you're one of his rock buddies. Thank you for listening. I end every episode with the Mary question. Jay Armstrong, who is an recently retired honors English teacher, speaking of, he is fighting a disease, and so he's had to retire, just wrote a book, Bedtime Stories for the Living. But he would take his honors English class, and they would spend 2 days breaking apart Thunder Road.
Wow.
They would look at every lyric. They would talk about the themes. They would compare it to Robert Frost. And at the end of the day, he would say, does Mary get in the car? So, Coach, does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
I know you're famous for this. This is really cool. I've been on a lot of podcasts. I've never had one end like this. If you think about this guy, and you think about the pull that he has on people and the effect that he's had on people, let alone the fact that he's with Mary, there is no way in the world she doesn't get in that car. Very I mean, nice. Who could turn down Bruce in that moment? I just can't imagine it.
Very nice. I appreciate that. Have you checked out Bruce's last album, Letter to You?
Yes, I have. And I casually listened to all of it, but there is a song. Well, once again, Jimmy sent me a song, and I listened to it, and it has such a personal touch to it for me. It's about losing somebody too early. And I can't give you the in this moment, I can't give it to you specifically, but yes, there's one song I've listened to over and over, and you know which one it is.
I'll see you in my dreams where all summers have come to an end. I'll see you in my dreams where we'll meet and live and love again. I'll see you in my dreams, yep, a rub around the river bend, for death is not the end, and I'll see you in my dreams.
Yeah,
I had that up. I have shit because I was like, I wonder if he's listened to this. I'm gonna end this podcast quoting that lyric, and this was not we had not talked about this beforehand, but it's true.
No,
yeah, it is.
That's an emotional song for me.
Yeah, I can see that. I appreciate it,
but uplifting too.
Yes, it is. I think the album, and I needed that album because it came at the end of 2020. We had so much strife in this nation and the pandemic. And to see that a 70-year-old Bruce with the E Street Band still making music, still having fun, it brought joy to my heart.
The documentary that came out most recently, that was of them making that album, correct?
Yes, it was. Yes.
That was so well done.
It was.
You felt like you were in the band, didn't you?
You did. It was amazing. So cool. Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. I want to add one last Bruce thing.
Please.
So here's another guy I've got to know that I wanted to see play, a guy named Matt O'Ree. And Matt's from Jersey, and he's a blues player. He's a phenomenal player, great musician. And so he and I can't remember how it worked out, but Bruce's son was taking lessons, got guitar lessons from Matt O'Ree.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And because he would come over and do it at the house.
Mm-hmm.
And, he goes, it was kind of freaky. You're going to his house, but you don't see him, but he's there.
Yeah.
And so he's walking out one day after the lesson, and Bruce is there. And so he gets to, meet him, and they talk. and the silver lining and all that was that Bruce did they sang a song.
Oh, how fun.
In fact, did Bruce write the song? Check out Matt O'Ree, because they did a song together.
Okay.
It's a great song.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
For the life of me, I can't come up with the name of the song right now. Matt wouldn't be happy about that.
yeah.
It's a good song. And it came from just running into him leaving the house one day.
Well, you would assume that this guy's pretty good if Springsteen's hiring him to teach his kid how to play guitar.
For all the guitar players he knows, yeah.
Right. I mean, you would just think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
Oh, Randy, this was a blast. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Continued success. Jesse. Hopefully we'll meet sometime on the road at a show.
That'd be awesome, man.
Yeah. And if you're ever, I know you tour and do speaking arrangements. So if you're going to be somewhere in the Dallas area, please let me know, because I'd love to see you and break bread. Listeners, go be vaccinated, go get boosted, be good to each other, because that's the only way we're going to get through this. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you.
I want and need your feedback. You can reach me multiple ways to tell me what you like or don't like about the show. You can reach out to give me guest suggestions, or maybe to join me on the podcast yourself. We're on Twitter at SetListingBruce or at Jesse Jackson DFW. I have an Instagram, SetListingBruce or Jesse Jackson DFW. Our Facebook page, facebook.com/SetListingBruce. Go to patreon.com/SetListingBruce to find out how you can support the show, and we have several tiers of support. Please go to your favorite podcast player and hit subscribe, and tell a friend about the podcast, because that is the way we're going to grow. If you're not tired of hearing me speak, you can hear me on Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast, where Charles Skaggs and I talk all things Doctor Who. The How Many podcast, where me and my friends Gary, Scott, Bob, and Jr. talk pop culture. And finally, my newest podcast, The Last Best Hope for Conversation, a Babylon 5 podcast, where Karen, Lou, and I are going through the TV show Babylon 5 one episode at a time. I am always looking for guests, so please reach out to me, setlustingbruce@gmail.com.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.